The atmosphere inside the opulent ballroom of the New York Charity Gala was filled with anticipation. This was not just another elite gathering. It was a prestigious event dedicated to goodwill, attended by high-profile figures from the world of philanthropy, media, and politics. Under the glow of dazzling chandeliers, guests sipped champagne and engaged in conversations about the latest global issues, charity initiatives, and, inevitably, politics. At the center of attention that evening was Melania Trump, the guest of honor. Adorned in an exquisite midnight blue gown, she carried herself with the same grace and poise that had defined her public image. Despite the political controversies that had surrounded her husband, Melania had remained focused on her humanitarian efforts, deliberately steering clear of political chaos. Her work in children's education and social welfare had earned her recognition beyond the political sphere, and tonight, she was here to speak on the importance of investing in future generations. As she stepped onto the stage, the ballroom fell silent. The crowd listened intently as she spoke with quiet confidence, her Slovenian accent adding a refined elegance to her words. Her speech was not about politics but about children, education, and the responsibility of those in power to make a difference. For a moment, it seemed that the evening would proceed without controversy. However, the calm was soon disrupted. A sharp voice suddenly cut through the air, turning the atmosphere tense. David Calloway, a well-known journalist infamous for his critical stance on conservative figures, stood at the front of the room. His microphone poised like a weapon, he was ready to shift the narrative. What began as a night of goodwill was about to take an unexpected turn. David Calloway was no ordinary journalist. A seasoned political correspondent with a reputation for aggressive questioning and sharp critiques, he had built his career on exposing conservative figures under the guise of journalistic integrity. He prided himself on being fearless, unafraid to challenge power, and relentless in his pursuit of what he considered to be the truth. However, his methods were often controversial, accused of being more about creating viral moments than genuine investigative journalism. That evening, standing near the front of the ballroom, Calloway had a plan. He had no intention of letting Melania Trump's speech conclude without confrontation. As she was finishing her remarks on children's education and humanitarian efforts, he seized the moment. His voice, laced with mockery, sliced through the respectful silence. "Mrs. Trump, how does it feel to be complicit in your husband's agenda?" The air in the room grew tense. Attendees shifted in their seats, recognizing immediately that this was not going to be a typical Q&A exchange. Calloway's tone was sharp, filled with the confidence of someone who had asked these types of questions before, someone who was used to putting people on the defensive. His words were not about seeking an answer, they were about making a statement. Before Melania could respond, he pressed further. "Your husband has been accused of dividing the nation, of inciting hatred? And yet, here you are, portraying yourself as a role model. Don't you think the true role models are the ones resisting him?" The ballroom was now thick with anticipation. A few journalists in the audience smirked, sensing the makings of a viral moment. Others watched in discomfort, unsure if they were witnessing a genuine journalistic inquiry or an ambush. Calloway was playing a dangerous game, one that had worked for him in the past. But what he didn't anticipate was that this time, his intended target wouldn't be the one to answer. Before Melania could open her mouth, a strong, resolute voice rang out from the audience. "That's enough." The entire room turned to see Barron Trump stepping forward. The tension in the ballroom was palpable, every eye turning toward the unexpected voice that had cut through the charged silence. Barron Trump, now 17 and no longer the reserved boy the public once knew, had stepped forward from the audience. His tall stature and composed demeanor immediately commanded attention. There was no hesitation in his steps as he moved past the elegantly set tables, making his way toward the stage. With squared shoulders and an unwavering gaze, Barron stepped onto the platform, positioning himself directly between his mother and David Calloway. The move alone shifted the atmosphere. The once smirking journalist raised an eyebrow, momentarily caught off guard by the young Trump's intervention. "Excuse me?" Calloway said, his voice carrying an air of forced amusement, as if trying to downplay what was unfolding before him. Barron, however, remained unfazed. His voice was steady and resolute as he spoke. "You can ask tough questions. That's your job. But this..." He gestured subtly toward Calloway. "This isn't journalism. This is harassment." A murmur spread through the crowd. A few guests exchanged glances, while others leaned in, sensing that this moment was far from over. Calloway let out a short, breathy chuckle, shaking his head. "Oh, and I suppose the president's son is about to give me a lecture on media ethics," he retorted, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Barron, unfazed, tilted his head slightly, his sharp blue eyes locking onto Calloway's with unshaken focus. "No," he responded smoothly. I'm going to show you what respect looks like. The shift in the room was undeniable. This wasn't the reaction Calloway had expected. He had anticipated defensiveness, perhaps even an emotional outburst, something he could twist into an easy headline. Instead, he found himself staring at a young man who was not just reacting but controlling the moment. For the first time that evening, Calloway's confidence wavered. And in that instant, the balance of power in the room had changed. Barron Trump was no longer just standing up for his mother, he was taking charge of the narrative itself. The tension in the ballroom had reached a boiling point. David Calloway, the once assured journalist, had expected to dominate the moment, turning Melania Trump into a political target. What he hadn't anticipated was Barron Trump flipping the script entirely. Standing tall and composed, Barron took a step closer, his height forcing Calloway to look up at him. His voice was calm but carried a weight that demanded attention. "You can ask whatever questions you want," Barron stated, his gaze unwavering. "But what you just did? That wasn't a question. You tried to embarrass my mother." The murmurs in the audience grew louder. Some guests, initially entertained by the confrontation, now saw the exchange in a different light. Calloway smirked, trying to regain his footing. "Mrs. Trump is a public figure," he countered. "She should expect tough questions." Barron didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, his voice razor sharp. "Then why didn't you ask about her work tonight? About the children she's helping?" The simplicity of the question hit harder than any argument. The room stilled. Calloway opened his mouth but hesitated. He had no real response because he knew Barron was right. His goal had never been to discuss charity or education. He had come to create a viral moment at Melania's expense. Sensing weakness, Barron pressed further. "You didn't come here for journalism. You came for a headline. You wanted a clip to post online, something to get likes from people who already agree with you." A few guests exchanged knowing glances. Even some reporters in the room, usually in sync with Calloway's style of questioning, remained silent. The shift in power was complete. Calloway, once the dominant force in the exchange, was now the one being scrutinized. His smirk had faded, his usual confidence replaced by a flicker of unease. Meanwhile, Melania remained silent behind her son, her expression unreadable. But the pride in her eyes spoke volumes. Barron Trump had not just defended her, he had completely turned the tables on David Calloway. David Calloway, once in full control of the confrontation, now found himself in an unfamiliar and uncomfortable position. His calculated ambush had turned into a disaster. The confident smirk he had worn moments ago was now strained, his usual command over the narrative slipping through his fingers. Determined to regain control, he let out a forced chuckle, shaking his head as if dismissing Barron's words as naive. "You're young, Barron," he said, crossing his arms. "You don't understand how this works." But Barron didn't even blink. His expression remained composed, his voice steady. "I know exactly how this works," he responded smoothly. "I've watched people like you go after my family for years. But I never imagined you'd be desperate enough to target a woman who's only here to help others." The remark landed hard. A ripple of murmurs swept through the audience. Some journalists exchanged uncertain glances, realizing that Calloway had overplayed his hand. Calloway's jaw tightened, but he tried to brush it off with another smirk. "That's the real world, Barron. Out here, journalists ask the tough questions." Barron didn't hesitate. He gestured toward the room. "How many people here came tonight to support children? To talk about education and giving back?" Several hands went up. The guests had come for a cause, not for political drama. Then Barron turned back to Calloway. "And how many of you showed up just to watch him turn this into a spectacle?" The silence was deafening. Calloway had no answer. He had expected Barron to be defensive, maybe even angry. Instead, the young Trump had completely outmaneuvered him. Barron tilted his head slightly, his voice calm yet firm. "From where I stand, the only person who thought this was about politics was you." Scattered applause broke out. Calloway, for the first time that evening, looked shaken. His plan had backfired spectacularly, and the room no longer saw him as the composed journalist in control, but as the man who had just been publicly outclassed by a 17-year-old. As the tension in the ballroom reached its peak, a shift in the atmosphere became undeniable. The crowd had turned, not in favor of Calloway, but in support of Barron. What had started as a journalist's attempt to humiliate a public figure had now spiraled into something entirely different, a moment of reckoning. A voice from the back of the room cut through the silence. "Barron's right." All eyes turned toward the speaker, an older man in a well-tailored suit, a distinguished businessman and well-known philanthropist. He stood up, his expression firm as he locked eyes with Calloway. "This is a charity event," he said, his voice carrying authority. "This isn't the place for petty political ambushes." A murmur of agreement spread across the room. A few guests nodded, while others whispered among themselves, reassessing the situation. Even those who weren't strong supporters of the Trumps couldn't deny the truth in his words. For the first time, Calloway looked uncertain. His usual confidence had faded. He had expected to dictate the moment, to control the narrative, but now, the room had turned against him. Another guest spoke up, this time a woman sitting near the front. "We came here to support children and education, not for a political showdown," she said pointedly. More murmurs, more nods. The tide had shifted. Meanwhile, Barron stood tall, his posture unwavering. He had not only defended his mother, but he had done so with grace and composure, refusing to be baited into anger or defensiveness. The crowd recognized this, and they respected it. Calloway's smirk had disappeared completely. He glanced around the room, searching for support, but found none. His colleagues, other journalists, sat silent, some looking away, unwilling to associate themselves with what was unfolding. Then, the first applause broke out. It started near the back, then grew, rolling across the ballroom like a wave. It wasn't just polite, it was approving. Barron had done what few had managed before. He had turned the tables on the media, and the crowd had rallied behind him. As the murmurs of the crowd grew into full applause, the power in the room had completely shifted. David Calloway was no longer in control. He had walked into the event expecting to craft a viral moment at Barron and Melania Trump's expense, but instead, he had walked straight into a calculated takedown, one he had never seen coming. Barron Trump, standing tall with unshaken composure, had not only defended his mother but had also dismantled Calloway's entire strategy with intelligence, precision, and poise. And now, for the first time, Calloway looked truly rattled. The journalist forced a weak chuckle, trying to regain control. "Well," he said, clearing his throat. "If you can't handle a little challenge, maybe politics isn't for you." It was a last-ditch effort, a feeble attempt to strike back, but the moment had already slipped from his grasp. Barron didn't even flinch. Instead, he smiled. A calm, knowing smile that cut deeper than any insult. "That's it?" Barron said smoothly, his voice unwavering. "That's all you've got?" A quiet ripple of laughter spread through the audience. Calloway's expression stiffened. Barron stepped forward, locking eyes with him. "You tried to paint my mother as the villain," he said, his tone measured but firm. "But you failed, because the truth is, she's here contributing, making a real difference. And you? You're here for a spectacle." A few guests near the back let out quiet humphs of approval. Even some of Calloway's fellow journalists were shifting in their seats, clearly uncomfortable with what had just transpired. Barron tilted his head slightly. "So tell me," he continued. "What exactly did you bring to this event tonight? Besides negativity?" Calloway's face darkened. His grip on the microphone tightened, his posture stiffened, but he had no answer. The silence was suffocating. Then, Barron delivered the final blow. "Maybe next time, if you want to go after a Trump, pick on someone your own size." The ballroom erupted in applause. It was over. David Calloway had lost, and Barron Trump had just made his mark on the world stage. As the thunderous applause echoed through the ballroom, David Calloway's once confident demeanor crumbled before everyone's eyes. The same journalist who had walked into the gala expecting to control the narrative, to humiliate Melania Trump, now stood frozen, his carefully planned ambush completely backfired. For a moment, he seemed desperate to salvage what little dignity he had left. His fingers tightened around the microphone, his jaw clenched, and his eyes darted around the room, searching for support. But there was none. The other journalists, his colleagues, who had once smirked in anticipation of a viral moment now avoided eye contact. Even those who shared his political views weren't willing to align themselves with his failure. Realizing his position was untenable, Calloway took a step back, swallowing his pride. He forced a smirk, but it no longer carried the confidence it once did. Instead, it was a mask. One that could barely conceal the sting of public humiliation. "Well," he muttered, forcing an attempt at casual arrogance, "I guess we've seen what the Trump family considers a debate." It was weak. A last, pitiful attempt to regain control. Barron Trump, however, didn't even flinch. He simply watched, calm and composed, as Calloway stood there, a man defeated by his own arrogance. Then, as if to drive the final nail into the coffin, Barron did something unexpected. He tilted his head slightly and gave Calloway a polite nod, as if dismissing him from the stage. The subtle gesture spoke volumes. "You may leave now?" The room fell silent for a brief second, before the applause started again, this time, even louder. Calloway had no choice. His attempt at reclaiming the moment had failed spectacularly, and now, the only thing left for him to do was walk away. Lowering his microphone, he took a step back, then another, before turning on his heel and walking off the stage. The cameras followed every step, capturing his walk of shame for the world to see. As he disappeared into the crowd, Barron turned back toward his mother. Melania, ever composed, reached out and adjusted his suit jacket, a simple but powerful gesture. No words were needed. Her pride in her son was clear to everyone in the room. Meanwhile, Calloway's career would never be the same again. As the echoes of applause filled the grand ballroom, Barron Trump turned back toward his mother. The tension that had once hung in the air like a thick fog had now dissipated, replaced by an undeniable sense of victory and respect. Melania Trump, poised and elegant as ever, stood still for a moment, studying her son with a soft yet knowing expression. She didn't need to say anything, the pride in her eyes said it all. Barron, once viewed by many as merely the quiet youngest Trump, had just shown the world that he was a force to be reckoned with. Then, in a small but powerful gesture, Melania reached forward and adjusted the lapel of his suit. It was a subtle act, but one rich with meaning. It wasn't just about fixing his appearance. It was a mother's way of acknowledging his strength, his growth, and his ability to stand his ground with grace and composure. Barron, still standing tall, offered her a small nod in return. There was no need for words. In that moment, an entire conversation passed between them, a silent exchange of mutual understanding. The ballroom, still buzzing with whispers and admiration, slowly quieted down as guests processed what they had just witnessed. Barron Trump had done more than just defend his mother, he had shifted the balance of power in the room. The tables had turned, and Calloway's humiliation was now the only story people would be talking about. For years, the media had often overlooked Barron, treating him as a mere shadow in his father's political legacy. But tonight, that perception had changed forever. As the applause resumed, growing louder, Melania took a step back, allowing Barron to bask in the moment. Though he had been raised in the public eye, this was the first time he had truly stepped into his own spotlight, and he had done so with unwavering confidence. The night had started as just another charity gala, but by the end, it had become something more, a moment of reckoning, a demonstration of dignity, and a defining chapter in Barron Trump's story. The confrontation between Barron Trump and journalist David Calloway was more than just a heated exchange at a high-profile event. It became a defining moment that showcased the power of composure, intelligence, and standing up for what is right. In today's world, where media narratives often shape public perception and personal attacks have become common, Barron's response serves as a lesson in grace under pressure, confidence, and strategic thinking. One of the most important takeaways from this event is the importance of self-control. In life, we will all face criticism, whether in school, at work, or in personal relationships. Some people may try to provoke us, discredit us, or question our abilities. However, reacting emotionally or aggressively often plays into their hands. Instead, like Barron, we must learn to stay calm, think critically, and respond with logic rather than emotion. By doing so, we maintain our dignity and often turn the situation in our favor. Another key lesson is knowing when and how to speak up. Many people hesitate to confront injustice or defend themselves because they fear making a scene or being judged. However, remaining silent in the face of disrespect or manipulation allows negativity to thrive. Barron demonstrated that it is possible to speak with confidence and assertiveness without resorting to hostility. In our daily lives, this means standing up for ourselves and others in a firm yet respectful manner, whether it's addressing workplace discrimination, defending a friend, or challenging misinformation. Furthermore, the incident highlights the role of integrity and authenticity in shaping one's reputation. Calloway approached the event with an agenda, to create controversy for his own gain. Barron, on the other hand, responded with genuine concern and conviction, making it clear that he was not interested in political games but in defending his mother and highlighting the real purpose of the event. In today's digital age, where social media often amplifies half-truths and sensationalism, maintaining authenticity and integrity in our words and actions is crucial. People are drawn to sincerity and respect those who stay true to their values rather than seeking attention or approval. Additionally, this moment reminds us of the power of preparation and knowledge. Barron didn't just rely on emotions to counter Calloway. He used well-reasoned arguments that exposed the journalist's bias. In life, whether in debates, job interviews, or negotiations, preparation is key. The more we educate ourselves and develop critical thinking skills, the better we can navigate difficult conversations and turn challenges into opportunities. Finally, the event underscores the value of knowing one's worth. Barron could have ignored Calloway's provocation, but he chose to defend his family and set the record straight. Similarly, in life, we must recognize our own value and never allow others to define us through false narratives or unfair judgments. Respect is earned through actions, and those who carry themselves with dignity and confidence ultimately gain the admiration of others. In a world full of noise, controversy, and media-driven agendas, Barron Trump's response serves as a reminder that true strength lies in calm resolve, respectful defiance, and unwavering integrity. By applying these principles in our own lives, we can navigate challenges with confidence and leave a lasting impact, just as Barron did that night.